Hi and welcome to Old Time Knowledge. Well, this video is me recording chili. I'm making chili. Yes, I do use these huge tubes of meat from Walmart because they're fine. It's 5 pounds and the ground beef ends up being way cheaper this way than when you buy it by the pound. And I don't believe that they use meat from different cows for these tubes than they do for the individual packages. And let's face it, if any of us ever buys sausage from Jimmy Dean, we're getting meat in tubes also. So anyway, the point is I'm using this. I know some people don't like it and they just turn their noses up at it. I have never had a problem with this meat. It is fine for my purposes, especially if I'm going to be making something like chili. So the recipe that I use when I make this is from an old Ball Bluebook from back like around 2000. I'll be sure and put the recipe in the show notes below. But you know, and I modify it a little bit because I make my chili a little bit more liquidy, just because I like that in case I do want to add beans to it, I can. But if I don't add beans to it, then I can just simmer the chili a little bit longer until, you know, it cooks off some of the liquid a little bit. Or I can just leave it, a little more liquid. So here I am dicing up onions. You know, you have your basic chili ingredients if you've ever made chili before, and you can do your own thing as far as what you put in it. But this is just something that I love having on the shelf. Again, I'm going to be putting the amounts for all this stuff in the description below. So I may not say all of the amounts here because obviously you see that there's 2 onions. But I mean, that's because they're large onions. If they were smaller onions, you might use more. Anyway, I really like to have something like chili on the shelf for stocking up because it's a complete meal, but it also can be something that can be served as a side. It's hearty. It's really good in cold weather. There's different ways you can serve it, different things you can use it with. And it's ground beef. That's just another way to have ground beef on the shelf. I do have ground beef just by itself in jars, but this, having chili like this is something that I like also. I just like to have variety. And when you're canning things to have in your pantry, it's good to have variety because I think what they say, variety is the spice of life, right? So anyway, I'm going to speed through some of these parts. Just to give you an idea of the types of ingredients that go in here. But what I want to encourage you to do is, if you like chili, can it up. If you don't like chili, but someone in your life loves chili, can some up. Because anything you can have on the shelf is not only going to be helpful to you, but you may be able to help others if they need it. This may be a really welcome meal for someone who might be hurting at some point later, and they just, they could use some food, they can use a hand, and if you can give them, a jar or 2 of chili that you canned, what an amazing gift that is. But for my part, I like chili. We like chili, so it's, for us, it's something that we'll enjoy, but naturally we're glad to share it if we need to. So when you're adding things like onions and whatnot, you can dice them as small as you want, just like I mentioned in the beef stew video. But you don't want to make things so small that they just liquefy and vanish. So that's the main thing. So let me speed through this onion part because you get the idea about the onions here. All right, now let's go back to the ground beef. I'm speeding this up because you understand what it is to brown ground beef. You're just going to brown the ground beef. You want to cook it down till the juices are really coming out, and then you want to kind of drain it. And in my case, what I do, I cook it and then I use whatever I need to use to get the fat out. You don't want a ton of fat in your jars. But once you get the juice drained out, the fat drained out, then that's when you're going to be starting to add the other ingredients, beginning with the onions. So let's just cook this ground beef down a little bit. Okay, I'm slowing this down because I want to show you the amount of fat that came out of 5 pounds of ground beef. So, I mean, if it's an 80-20 ground beef, then you're looking at a fifth of the meat being fat. So, or a fifth of what you're buying being fat. So anyway, now I'm going to toss the onions in, and you can see how I diced them all up. And I'm going to just start mixing those in with the ground beef, sauteing them, and I'm going to begin adding the other ingredients. All right, now that the onions have pretty well cooked into the ground beef, it's time to add garlic. The recipe calls for a clove of garlic, but I mean, I just use my judgment. You put in what you want. You're going to see I'm going to put in a good heaping spoonful of garlic because I like garlic. I like garlic in all kinds of things. So, but you can follow the recipe precisely if you want and just do a clove of garlic, but I like a lot of garlic. Now it's time for other ingredients. So next I'm going to add in a teaspoon of cumin. Then it's going to get 1.5 tablespoons of salt. Next it's going to get a 1/2 cup of chili powder. And then next, if you wanted to, you could add some red hot pepper, but I didn't do that. I'm adding 2 quarts of my tomatoes that I canned from my garden. These are actually from year before last, and they're canned with basil, and I like it that way just because if I use it for pasta sauce, it works. But the basil's not very strong in it, so it's not going to bother it's not going to bother the chili at all. And I'm taking the basil leaves out, as you can see. So it's not like I used a ton of it, but anyway, I'm just wanting to use these up because, like I say, these are from my garden from a couple of years ago. So I'm trying to make use of these. So I'm, getting this totally mixed in. The recipe calls for 6 cups of canned tomatoes. Well, that's 6 cups. Actually, that's about 8 cups, which is where I was talking about. Mine has a little more liquid in it because it's actually 8 cups because each quart has 4 cups. It's about 8 cups rather than just the 6 cups of liquid, but that's perfect because that way I've got slightly more liquid so that when I make chili from one of my jars, if I want, I can add beans and there's enough liquid to really accommodate it. And if not, if I'm not going to add beans, then I can just cook it down. And you see I'm also adding an 8-ounce can of tomato sauce because, again, I do want a little bit more liquid in here. So I'm just going to continue to let this simmer for about 20 minutes until the flavors have really come together, and then I will get it jarred up, and I'll show you how that goes. All right, it's been about 20 minutes, so I'm going to take the lid off, give everything a good stir, and I would say this is definitely time to put in the jars. Okay, this is the thing. It's kind of weird, and I'm still not completely sure about how it happened. I mean, I guess it could be from the extra tomato sauce I used and the extra tomatoes I used, but still. The recipe says it'll do 6 pints or 3 quarts. But I'm going to end up with more than 6 pints. In fact, I end up with 10 pints from this, which is great. I'm thrilled to have 10 pints of chili, but I mean, it's just a lot more than what the recipe says that I should have. And so I don't know, maybe the recipe was assuming I'd be using 73% ground beef, in which case I'd be losing a lot more of that in fat. And then also, of course, I added the extra cups of tomatoes and then the can of tomato sauce. I still don't see how that's going to make 4 pints though, because 4 pints is 8 cups. So, I mean, that's a lot. But anyway, it's good. So that's what I ended up with this recipe. I ended up with 10 pints altogether. And so, your mileage may vary. So anyway, I'm going to finish getting these in jars. Then I'm going to wipe the rims with vinegar and get the lids and the rings on the jars. And I'll be processing these for 75 minutes, of course, because it's got meat in it. And they're pints. And so I will have all the instructions for this recipe exactly as it appeared in my, I think it was year 2000 or something, Ball Bluebook. And so you can follow it precisely or do your own thing with it. But I really like this recipe. I think it has a lot of good flavor. In fact, I like it so much that I would even just make this recipe for chili. I just think it's a good recipe. So, okay, so it's just a little shy of 10 pints. Not quite 10 pints. But anyway, you see that this made a lot of chili. So that worked out great. Look at me. See how I'm getting some from the other jars? Because that way I can have a full 10 pints. Because otherwise I'll just have some chili just sitting out. And we're not eating chili on this particular day. So I just stole about a teaspoon from each of the jars. They're still at an inch head space. Yeah, they're still good. But yeah, you see I ultimately end up with 10. Anyway, I was kind of amusing. All right. So here I am, just like I said, using some vinegar to wipe the rims of the jars, getting the lids on. You want to make sure that they're clean, that you don't have any grease or any other spills on the jars, no nicks, no chips, no debris. You want a really good seal on these. You're just putting those rings on finger tight. You don't want them to be turned on tight. Basically, the way I would describe it is you're just putting the lid on and you're giving it a turn until the jar just barely begins to turn. Then you know you've got it finger tight. So I'm going to get these loaded up in the canner and I'll show you how they look when they're done. All right, y'all. So I totally missed out on recording these when they came out of the canner. But here we are days later and they're in my pantry. I actually was replenishing what I had. So this is actually slightly more than 9 jars in my pantry. But nevertheless, it shows you how they look once they've totally cooled down and they've been put up for our family to enjoy whenever we want them. These are so good. I hope that you'll make this if you like chili. Or like I said, even if you don't, because somebody's going to like chili, get some on your shelf. This is a great thing to have. I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter, which is not going out frequently, but when I do send it out, it will have a PDF that you can print. See you again soon. Bye-bye.